One day you look in the mirror, Zach, and you don't recognize who that person is staring back.
Sure. Randall Norwood is the son of a military man. And if you grew up in a house like that, you know exactly what that means. There was a standard. It was not optional. Discipline, integrity, accountability. Those were not suggestions. Those were the operating system. Randall took that operating system into a career that most people could not even map. Recreation therapy at a state hospital, to sales and in HR technology, and now in sales of medical devices at a major corporation. He has been performing at a high level across multiple industries for years. But there was a season where the performance and the person, they didn't match. Randall went through a darker chapter in his life. And the thing that pulled him out of it, it was not a new training plan or a motivational speech. It was his faith. When Randall got right spiritually, the rest followed. He connected with me through LinkedIn. He found a nutrition mentor, a close friend that pointed him in the right direction. And one by one, the structure that his father had modeled for him as a kid came back into his life. Not because he went looking for a program, because he got aligned, and then the right people showed up. The results speak for themselves. He dropped weight. He sleeps better. He has the endurance to pursue his goal of becoming a collegiate basketball official. And the confidence and sharpness that came out of that rebuild, it played a direct role into landing the career that he has now in medical devices. That is not aging. That is refusing to rot. I'm Zac Armstrong, former Marine, Naval Officer, fighter pilot, turned performance coach. This is no hype, just standards. And today, Randall is going to walk us through what it looks like when a man stops trying to control everything on his own and he gets aligned spiritually. And then he executes with the kind of discipline that his father built into him from day one. If you're in the middle of your own rebuild, this one is for you. Subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. And let's get into this. Hey, Randall, again, thank you for coming on the show today. So let's get right into it. Tell me about your father. What branch was he in, and what was your household like growing up?
Yeah, Zach, thanks for having me. Excited about our conversation today. My father, Travis Norwood, was a Master Sergeant, Air Force. Mm-hmm. And so you can imagine growing up in the household, it was, yes, sir, no, sir. And so, that was something that, even my peers, right, it was just such a standard way of speaking. And so, he had structure, and foundation for me. And he wanted to make sure that, just all the way around, the way I wore my clothes, how I wore my hat, how I presented myself was done in a professional manner. That would be something I'd be proud of. I wasn't quite in the military. I never was a veteran myself, but it certainly felt like I was, in the household. So
yeah, it sounds like it. What kind of values do you think he instilled in you growing up?
Well, I would say primarily, he started, he was a man of faith, and a lot of our conversations, I started to appreciate it more as I matured into a man, because we'd have, conversations like anybody with their parents about, sports or different things, but he'd always tie it back, to the Word of God. And so, I grew up, understanding that everything that I would approach, that there was a standard and a foundation from the Word. And so the main value that he gave to me was to live my life based off of faith and an approach that I had purpose, And so I've always been a very purpose-driven, individual, and that has really impacted my life in multiple ways, personal relationships, professional, and everything else surrounding that.
Right. And so especially with our parents, sometimes it's the parents are, just being hard on you because they don't know better. And then there's sometimes where the parent is being hard on you to try to instill something into you.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think your father was doing, and what does that mean to you?
Well, it's interesting, not just, recently, reaching a milestone of turning 40, and I see things through a lens that we talk about the natural progression, right, of maturing. And, your parent, I know my dad, at least, he would always say, you may not understand this now, but you understand it later. And I, see that more than ever now. And so
very easy to.
Absolutely. And so there are just a lot of, nuances and things where, he was being really hard on me and making me live a life of discipline, but he was seeing life through a lens that I wasn't seeing it through yet, which I'm, starting to see more now. And so he was preparing me even at that young age where you have to get to them, to your children when they're younger, because that's the impressionable stage.
Sure. I mean, we learn a lot of what we do in life at a young age, and we don't realize how much impact What are one or two things that you remember as a child that you feel like I can look back now and go, oh man, that was something my dad taught me?
Yeah, I would say so. Work ethic, right? So after he retired from the military, he started his own business, and so I never thought of myself to be like an entrepreneur, right, or even a business-minded person. And so I'm in sales now, and so I look back at those times where he would say, "Hey, your birthday and the holidays are just another day," right? And like everybody else, say I'm wanting to go, let's go party and have fun and do things, but we're out there. He was a professional landscaper, and we're out there cutting somebody's yard on Christmas Eve while they're having a Christmas Eve party, and so we're the ones working. But I understood that you have to have that framework where until you accomplish what it is that you need to do for you and build, your household up, you can't go have that life, because a lot of people try to have the life without the work, and it's out of balance.
So there's no fake it till you make it with you?
So it's pretty straightforward, straight to it.
Yeah.
I would say that for sure.
So you started off as a recreation therapist at Mississippi Hospital. How'd you end up there?
So when I was in college, I worked with the athletic program. So I worked with football in the fall, softball in the spring. And so ended up doing my master's program in health and recreation. And so the natural kind of progression was, hey, I had a biology degree for my bachelor's. So mental health, recreation, right? Kind of makes sense. And so I wanted to give that a try. And I was working in a elderly population with dementia, residents, which actually ties in to kind of what I'm doing today, because there were a lot of veterans. It was a state, run hospital. And so so I was able to go out there, and I knew someone who was in personnel there, and then he said there was a job opening. So I applied, and I did that for a few years, and it was very impactful as a kind of the real start to my career.
Right. Well, speaking of your career, can you kind of walk me through how that's looked for you and how it's went along?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, starting with that kind of mental health, rec therapist job, I had the opportunity to coach a little bit as when I was in grad school. And that kind of led to a director of operations role, assistant softball coach role while I was at Jackson State University, my alma mater. And so when I left there and went to the mental health recreation therapy, I knew that I wanted to do something that I could, the first sales job I ever had, the hiring manager said, why do you work, right? And everybody wants to give this profound answer. You work to make money, right? Because
at the end of the day,
right?
I mean,
and so I
free over here.
Absolutely. And so I never thought I'd be in sales, right? Because commission, and people get kind of leery when your performance and your metrics, they want that base salary that's solid, right?
Security.
They want security, absolutely. And so when I got into sales, I fell in love with it. Just kind of my personality. I bringing my dad back up. He was a very charismatic person, and so I was able to kind of maybe pick that up from him more so than I even knew. And so sales fit. And so I had a couple of early sales roles, and I knew with my biology background that I wanted to maybe get into medical sales one day. And so the right opportunity kind of came along, but I know some people, you can't worry about, comparing yourself to others, right? And so my trajectory is maybe a little bit non-traditional. And a lot of times you'll see medical sales professionals that have been in it right out of college or the internship, right?
Sure.
And so my route was more so through some variety of different sales roles. And then I was able to kind of get the sales acumen and develop myself to be prepared for medical sales. And this is what I'm doing now.
Okay. Was there anything that stuck out to you about any of these roles or where you were moving along and how you saw personal growth?
100%. You learn how to build relationships and become emotionally intelligent on how to influence people. I think sales reps oftentimes get a bad rap, almost like people say you're a used car salesman. Sometimes
100%.
Yeah,
it's instilled from us childhood, like don't be a salesman or don't be
right.
It's really what we're trying to say is don't be disingenuous, right? And that's the way a lot of people come across in sales, and they don't mean to be, but
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I can see why the inhibition lies there, because if you're a good sales rep, you have to have influence. And there's a difference between influence and manipulation, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
ethical, unethical.
100%, right? And so there is a level of where you are manipulating if you're a good sales rep, but if you're asking the right questions and understanding what matters to people, then you're influencing. You're not necessarily, obviously, you have goals and metrics you have to hit, but hopefully you take a sales job where you have something that you're selling that's a quality product and there's a need for that product. And when you identify that need and understand what motivates people, that helps you in all aspects of your life, not just in sales. Because, I know a lot of times I see different, videos and, social media where, couples are going out for, to get something to eat, and we're trying to figure out, where we're going to go. And if you just ask a question and say, you'll never believe, Zach, what I have a taste for. And then when I get you to say, oh, you want, a certain burger joint or something like that, right? Now I'm like, absolutely, that's what I was thinking. And now that's where the manipulation comes in, right? Because that may have not been what I was thinking. But if I get you to give me the answer and then I go with that answer, now I've influenced you and you didn't even realize it.
And let's talk about this. Like, so obviously careers moving along. Where did you find yourself? Like, oh, there's not a real timeline put to where you're talking about right now.
Sure.
But in a timeline perspective, as you were advancing through this, where do you feel like you were maybe falling off from the physical standpoint, or where did you feel like that was happening?
Yeah, so for me, I would say, everybody wants to blame COVID for everything, right? But that's certainly a line of demarcation for us, in our modern society, right? And I think back to like some of the World War I and World War II, and you see those shows, and they say pre-World War, post-World War. So for me, pre-COVID, things, career was going well, had, some sales trajectory going well, I was fit, kind of in the gym, kind of knew the right way, nutrition, things like that. And then COVID happens, and I'm homebound and I'm not, working out. It's easy to walk from the couch to the refrigerator. You're getting food delivered to you, fast food, things of that nature. And so when I had an opportunity to do a tech sales role where right after COVID, probably maybe 2021, 2022, to put a time on it, I ended up, the tech company sold, right? And I didn't have a job. And so I had to go take an independent contract gig where I was constantly on the road. And so I'm just eating whatever, 16-hour days, and I'm not working out at all.
Yeah, just letting it flow.
Right. And compound that with the, the personal relationship that fell through in my life. My father ends up passing away. So like, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, everything was impacted, right? And so then one day you look in the mirror, Zach, and you don't recognize who that person is staring back at you.
Sure. Man in the mirror is a big thing. We're usually our harshest critics ourselves. So do you think in those moments you were meeting your father's standard?
Oh, not at all. And I can say that 100%. And that was what was so devastating is because, my personal story is knowing the right thing to do, right? Having done the right, correct, right? And doing that for this, call it a season of my life, right? And then kind of hitting the unexpected of life and then not upholding that standard when it matters most. And that's when adversity hits. And so I was really hard on myself when I had that man in the mirror moment because, I'm looking at myself, Zach, like, better than this, right? And so it's like, now what are you going to do to be intentional and deliberate about fixing that? And so for me, that was kind of my come to moment where I said, well, you're Travis Norwood's son and you know better. And now he's gone and you don't have that, that.
You have to uphold it.
That's right. And so legacy became.
Yeah, the legacy within inside.
Yes, the legacy became so important.
I feel, and this is, one of the reasons you and I connect so deeply is I have the same, but it's my grandparents and it's my grandmother specifically and my grandfather specifically who were those two people for me. And because I understand it differently. When you went through that darker season, what was that like, with such clear standards that your father set, such clear goals and being instilled into you as that legacy, what was it like when you started realizing this isn't who I'm supposed to be?
It was challenging, to be quite honest, because, I always prided myself on making good decisions, quality decisions, and not always the right decisions, but for the most part, I knew that the motivation behind a decision I was making, it was something that, was going to ultimately lead, to the right, outcome. And you can't control outcomes, but you just control having to make the best decision. So my decision-making process was terrible to get involved in that situation that I was involved in. And then I didn't know how to get my way out of it. And so that's where I had to turn back to my faith, which that was the standard, right?
Sure.
That my father, gave me was faith.
How long did it take you to realize that you were actually in that moment, right? So a lot of times when we get inside, whether you want to call it that tunnel to where, you're inside the storm and you're just keep falling down. Sometimes we don't realize we're in the storm.
Sure.
Did you realize it in the beginning or did you and let it fester, or was it something that you said, oh shit, I'm here?
What's really interesting about it, Zach, is after I made the decision, I almost knew immediately, but I was sitting with, you've made it, now you have to make it work. And so one of the biggest takeaways that I learned from making that decision was you can't be afraid to evolve and adapt and adjust.
Sure. In that moment in time when you were there, though, like there's some self-reflection that was obviously happening. What all was it costing you from, your health, from your legacy, from your relationships, all these things? What was it costing you?
Yeah, it was costing me, quite frankly, cost me everything. There was a time, financially, physically, emotionally, mentally, all those things were on a negative trajectory. Now, did I necessarily realize it at the time? No.
We usually don't.
Obviously, right? But in retrospect, yeah, it was a slow deterioration of all the things, all of my values, everything that, that desire and that purpose that I knew I had for my life. And it lasted, I would say it was probably about, when I was involved, in that dark period of my life, it was probably about a 2-year window. And then it all culminated with me. I'm in a hospital, like literally in the hospital. My blood sugar is just off the scales, and they're like looking at me like, "Why are you walking around? Like, what's going?" Like any day, like my probably organ failure is coming, right? And so I'm in the hospital, getting some fluids and some things, they're trying to figure out, what exactly is going on. And then finally, at that moment, I'm like, some things have to change, right?
Yeah, and obviously I resonate that too. I'm very open about myself, and I was in the hospital myself, but mine was for alcohol, right? And whether it's the health, whatever direction it brings you to get to that point, it does something to you. And it's when you sit there and you have to have that self-reflection of where you're at and what you've allowed yourself become, especially when
yes,
the values and what is right or wrong, and it with your heart because it was instilled into you. And I so deeply understand that and what it can do to you.
And Zach, I'll say it makes it that much more debilitating because you're
100%.
sitting in it, knowing you shouldn't be there, knowing what you have to do to get out, and trying to find the strength to say, like, what's the next step?
100%. And you got to find that domino. And yours was faith.
Correct.
Your domino was faith. Can you talk me through that and how that looked for you?
Sure. So faith was certainly the catalyst. And, I'm a strong believer that, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the things not seen. So you may not always see it immediately, but you have to have the faith to do it. And that is kind of the key, right, to seeing God's presence in your life. Because if you don't believe that he is, and you don't believe that he's a rewarder of those that diligently seek him, then you can't possibly have faith.
Yeah. I was about to say, then what was the point of believing if you don't?
Correct.
Right.
So if you start with that as your basis, then now you understand there's nothing you have to do to earn. You don't have to actually, quote unquote, take the step that we're talking about. It just the step, so to speak, is faith, having faith. And then through faith, things will be revealed to you. And so that's what my step was.
I think the state would be reestablishing faith.
Correct.
Right. It's not that you never stopped believing in God.
Correct.
You just didn't want to look and see you anymore. You hid yourself from his eye.
Absolutely.
And that's the way I felt, is I hid myself from his vision where I didn't have to be judged, or felt like I was judged. But like any true parent, I never look at my children and judge them.
Correct.
They're my children. I will love them through everything. That sounds very much what you just had to do, is just reestablish that connection. Right?
Absolutely. And I think that's why it's so impactful. I did get to have my father in my life. And what I can say now that I realize about that is understanding, now that he's gone, right? Understanding that what he did to set the framework, it kind of helps me even that much more with my faith in God, because I know, to your point, if my dad loved me to this degree to discipline me and set the standard, then that's the same approach that God's trying to do for us all as well.
I agree. With that, there's a certain control mechanism when you did kind of said, like, putting your faith. What was it like, releasing some of that control and, giving it back to the faith, giving it back to God?
Yeah, it was everything. So for me, it's almost one of those moments where he, like, to your point, is like, hey, I've been waiting for you. That there's a, famous, footprints in the sand, right? Picture. And he's carried us through those moments, right? So he never left me. And so he was just waiting for me to acknowledge him, right? And so once I acknowledged him, really everything opened up for me. It came to me, and so the things that I said, this is where I'm at. I'm here because of decisions that I've made, but I'm still giving it to you, right? And sometimes that may seem selfish, right? But that's who God is for us. Even when we go mess it up, if we'll just give it back to him, he'll correct it and he'll restore it. And so almost immediately when I had that conversation with God, he said, I'm going to bring you to a season of restoration. And this is the key, Zach. He said, it's not going to be what you thought it was before. It's going to be even better than that.
Sure. And that brings me right to the segment. Shortly after all this started happening, you actually connected with me, right?
Absolutely.
And you found me on LinkedIn. Tell me how that came to fruition.
For sure. So what ended up happening was, like I told you, that moment I was in the hospital and all these things. So, you can only imagine when you're not, having a healthy lifestyle. They want to put you on blood pressure medication. They want all this kind of stuff, that you need. Because
that's a
cholesterol.
Doctors are good at that, man.
Yeah.
They're good at prescriptions.
Absolutely. So your cholesterol level's off the charts. So I said, I'm not going to be, going into, turning 40 and having, to have a regimen of medication, right?
Yeah.
So, and then to your point, right, I knew what I needed to do, right, to do it, right? So what I started doing was just going for walks, and I started cooking at home instead of eating out and things of that nature. So I just, I stopped the bad behavior first, and then I started, researching. I won't say researching, but just I changed the habits of my daily, of what I was reading, what I was watching, and I looked at things that I knew would kind of steer me towards where I was headed. And so I use LinkedIn a lot because obviously I'm in sales, so it's a professional platform. And I don't think it was a coincidence. I think I was led to see your post because we weren't connected on.
No, we were not.
Right. So thank you for your brilliant marketing and things that you do, because you came across my feed. And so I read, one of your posts, and I was like, that resonates with me. Right. And I do really believe that the aesthetics matter. And so you had pictures of yourself, you had visibility. And I said, this is a person that obviously doesn't just talk the talk, but walks the walk. And then obviously your military background that kind of connected, because I have a friend right now that's in the military, that from high school buddy that's in the Air Force. And so I can kind of connect with other people that are veterans, and people that are
plus Master Sergeant.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So everything about you kind of spoke to, right, something I was familiar with. And so one of the things I will say is that I sent you a LinkedIn direct message and you responded immediately.
Oh, I'm good at that.
Yeah. And so that
people mistake how quick I am.
No, that's great, and that's rare, believe it or not. Even if obviously you're marketing and looking for clients, but sometimes people take that for granted when people reach out. And so just which I wouldn't expect anything different, right, from someone of your standard. But when you reached out and we had that call, I knew that there was a sense inside. I said, I need to work with this person, and I knew that for me, Zac, I needed some accountability because I couldn't trust myself, right? To say, if I just take this on, because I'd already proven to myself, hey, you've made a bad decision. It's got you there. So if I'm giving it to God, he's going to put the right people in situations in my life for me to get the direction that I needed. And that's who you were for me.
Sure. And, just for people get an understanding of where you are, because they're obviously they can't see where you were right now.
Sure.
Kind of like, where were you at when we kind of started, like, energy wise, weight wise, all this, where were you kind of at? Like, you were getting your mind straight for sure. Where were you
For
at?
sure. Yeah. So, I don't mind, sharing. I was plus 300 pounds, right? Was having trouble sleeping through the night. Obviously, I didn't go to the doctor for it, but I believe I probably had sleep apnea. I could just tell I would wake up and, kind of doing some research on my own. I was like, why am I having, because I don't get headaches. I was having these headaches and it was pounding right here. And I believe that I wasn't probably breathing right at night. I didn't know that, but I was going to actually have a sleep study done soon. And, my blood pressure was off the Richter scale. Cholesterol was high, and I didn't have energy. And that, another reason why I thought I had sleep apnea is because I'd never get tired during the day. So I found myself at 2 or 3 o'clock, like needing to go to sleep. Just like, I was scared to drive because, I'm in field sales, because I would fall asleep. That never happened to me, right? So I knew all this was tied to my health. And so, my back lower back was killing me. And so if I tried to, go on extended walks, somewhere just in a grocery store or something, like I would have to lean on the cart. So it was bad. It was really bad.
It was bad. Yeah. You probably don't remember this, or maybe you do. I remember the first time I spoke to you, not on the phone. I remember that conversation, but then I remember when we had the Zoom call, and I remember thinking, and at the end of the call, I don't remember if you remember, I was like, I told you something to the degree like, man, this is one of the most enjoyable conversations I've ever had on here. I was like, you're one of the most articulate people I've ever met in my life. And you probably thought, oh man, he's just being a salesman, or maybe you didn't. I don't know. But you, just as much as you say I resonate with you, it gets discounted. Like when I work with people, how much they resonate with me. And from the start, and I'll go into it more later, but from the start, I knew there was something there. Like it was just uncanny, almost like you talk about how God can talk to you the same way.
Absolutely.
Talking about like, the support system that once you came into working with me, like how did that support system really help you, get along?
Yeah. So for me, your platform, the app that you have, is phenomenal. And I know that it's probably pretty commonplace now with, we're in the modern technological age, right? For people to have apps and develop things, but sometimes it doesn't work well. It was simple. It was everything I needed, from workouts, the nutrition component, and the documentation of logging things. That is, I think, one of the most impactful things for me personally that I took away from it, because now it made it real as far as the accountability factor, to be able to say, okay, you need to get a certain amount of protein, keep your carbs at bay here. And I was able to actually log and track those things for me to build a routine to now get that momentum. And so that for me was what, that framework that you kind of set out when we had that conversation and you said, hey, you can get your blood work done and we can tie out to what you have specifically your needs, that meant everything, because now you're not guessing on like, if I do this, will I see results? It's like, no, here's the actual system and framework. And to just kind of compound that a little bit more, like as a salesperson, what kind of differentiates, as we kind of joke, and I respect all salesmen, so I don't mean to take shots at used car salesmen, but the difference between, a used car salesman and the sales that I believe for me is impactful is there's a system and a framework that we utilize that makes it repeatable and you can replicate it. And so that's why a lot of times these Fortune 500 companies, right, they can take, maybe a novice person that's right out of college and make them an intern because the system works. Now, if you're going to excel, then that's where your personal, approach comes. But that system that you gave me worked. And I could see it on the front end because, to your point, what we talked about earlier, I knew earlier that, hey, this is what you need to do. I just wasn't doing it. So when I saw like, oh, yeah, Zac's got everything I need from a system perspective for me to succeed, that made all the difference.
Yeah, and it works for a lot of people. But for all of this, your standard was where it was at. How would you kind of like classify yourself as far as like the standards that were set with your life with your dad, and where like right before we started, where do you think your standards were at in comparison to where you had them in your life beforehand?
Yeah, the good thing about before we had our conversation, I'd had, my conversation with God about faith. And so my mentality was where it needed to be. It's just my habits weren't, right? Mm-hmm. And so those were things that I needed to change. And so I was still, and obviously, from our personal, conversations and as we've done this process, I wasn't good logging at first, right?
No,
so,
you were terrible.
Yeah,
you were one of the worst people ever.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I agree. And so, I have to tell you, like, I had to log everything for work. So, like, this is another. But when I started learning how to prioritize myself, that's one of the things you helped me, really accomplish is, first and foremost, it doesn't matter what you're doing in your career as an executive. If you haven't prioritized yourself and your health, what does the rest of it matter? Because you're not going to be able to perform the way.
No, you will not be. And so, and what we disassociate with, like, especially as men, we're so bad at it. Women are so much better than us at it. Is we disassociate. Like, we think things are either physically, mental, or emotionally. As men, that's kind of how we classify.
Correct.
They're all intertwined, man. Mm-hmm. Right? There is zero doubt. Like how you look in the mirror and feel yourself, just like when you were looking at the man in the mirror, like you said, and you didn't like that reflection that had a mental trigger, an emotional trigger, and a physical trigger. All three.
Correct.
When this started changing and that chaos and that dislike and that emotional, all that stuff, what did that start doing to you from an emotional level when you had all this chaos start coming into structure again?
I tell you what, Zac, once I kind of got more to a rhythm and built some momentum, the confidence in myself to give myself more grace just shot through the roof. And I remember one of our first conversations you and I had is you said, look, you've been through a lot. And you basically, it was almost a paternal-like approach. You're like, it's okay. Like, yeah. You're doing what you need to do, or you recognize it, you're making the first step, and you're pushing through to try to, to change things. I remember that stood out to me so much, and that gave me confidence in and of itself. And then once I started really trusting the process that you were implementing for me, my confidence shot through the roof. And so I started to really forgive myself for being where I was at. And then it empowered me to be able to say, okay, you can still accomplish everything you've ever wanted to accomplish. And if there's something that I was not able to maybe do, or a result that I wasn't seeing as soon, I was able to be more patient with myself.
Yeah.
So it reset all of the way that it reset the approach that I had probably even prior to that bad decision and that dark moment, my father passing away. There was a sense of maybe despair that I was like, wow, I know life happens, but wow, life happens, right? And then it's like, well, as disappointed as I was for not handling adversity like I knew I could have, well, it's never too late to do that. It's never too late till it's too late, right? But we had made that, you gave me the grace to be able to have that momentum, and my confidence came and I was empowered. And it was like, yeah, you can still be that guy, and even that much more.
Yeah. And all that helped, I feel like, all this transformation from not just a physical thing, because once you do start that physical transformation, it leads into, like we talked to, the confidence, which leads into the emotional, which leads into the mental, all that. It helps you, come to the point to where you were landing a major role at a major company. Tell me how that rebuild helped show up for you in that professional manner.
Absolutely. When you said that about how the physical leads to the mental, right? There's a verse in the Bible. It's in First Timothy. It talks about bodily exercise profiteth little, and it doesn't mean that exercise isn't important. What I would like people to understand about that verse is bodily exercise is so important to you in building momentum for everything else in your life that it's that much more important for you to make sure the spiritual is taken care of. But physical well-being is a gateway to spiritual well-being.
Sure, I 100% agree.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so obviously we know that, our physical bodies will perish. We're all, we have a date where, we'll leave this world. But it's that much more important to take care of the physical because that is the temple, right? That is the body's a temple. And so for me, being able to get my physical health together helped me have, because I'm a very optimistic person in general.
You don't say.
And so I have so the positive aptitude of, I'm ready to run through a brick wall, whenever I know that I'm, to accomplish a goal or something I want to do. And so breaking into medical sales was something I'd always really wanted to do. My academic background, I have a degree in biology, and I saw someone who was traveling and I love to travel. That's the other thing, right? So he was traveling for work, company car, the whole deal, right? And so I wouldn't have been prepared for that, Zach, prior to meeting you and prior to establishing the system and this framework. I wouldn't have been prepared for it. And so being able to go through the interview processes, which anyone who's going through any sorts of just sales in general, those processes are long, they're tedious. When you're dealing with medical sales, you're having to learn disease states and efficacy and safety profiles. So there's a lot of, science to it as well as the business part of it. And so that right there, you have to have the stamina just to try to break into the industry. Not much less be in the industry. And so that fueled right around the time I met you. I had met someone else who said, hey, let's refine your professional summary and resume, and let's really help you break into the industry. And so I was so happy that paralleled at the same time, because as I built momentum with you, I was building momentum. And then right around the same time that when I came out to see you around December, because I think we connected, was it around October? I think we may have connected.
September. It was in September.
September-ish, right. And so I ended up getting the offer for the role in December, right before I came out to visit with you.
Yeah. And before we go to the next thing, I want people to understand where you are now. So you got that job, and we talked about where you were at the state of when you started. Where are you at now?
That's a loaded question because, there's a song, I think I'm on top of the world, right?
Yeah.
And it's not because of any result or outcome that I have, but it's really the momentum and the faith that I know that I really believe that the presence of God is in my life. And there are so many nuanced things that I see every day that's reminding me that I'm not where I am of my own volition. And so I think I'm, right around 92 pounds down from where I started. I had an opportunity
in about 8 months.
And that's the thing. The momentum of it is crazy.
Yeah.
And it's not because of some miracle drug, right? It's because of a system and a process that we were talking about earlier. And I'm in a career that's not just, because sometimes you break into a medical sales role and it's an entry-level role. I was able to, I do have sales experience. I don't have medical sales experience. And so I was able to break into a specialty role, and I'm working in the government accounts. So I get to, see my dad every day in the faces of the patients that are in the VA hospitals. And I'm just, feeling great, emotionally, physically, mentally, everything is, I don't have a Richter scale for it because it's definitely off.
That's great. Which takes me to, you're obviously one of the most genuine people I've ever met in my life, to be 100% honest. There's not much that comes out of your mouth that you're not very meaningful about, which is rare. It reminds me actually of my grandmother a lot. With that said, you have a lot of passions, and one of your passions is collegiate basketball and officiating. So kind of describe what was one of the biggest things that when we started too was another reason that you wanted to do it, because what was your passion when you were coming up, and where you lost it, and then where it is now?
So got to go back to Travis Norwood, my father. So Master Sergeant Norwood, we'll call him. He officiated. So that was something he did. And so I would always go to the gym with him, and I would love doing it. So I got started when I was about 15 or 16 years old, doing that at the Boys and Girls Club there in Texas, where I grew up. And so when I went to college, I did intramurals, and then I got into high school. And then I was at 24 years old, refereeing college basketball at a pretty high level. And so that was always a goal and aspiration, was to go as far as I could with collegiate basketball. Or, I have a couple of friends that work in the NBA. So if that would have been on my radar, hey, great. And I had that momentum going. So that's one of those things that I said I was disappointed about. Right prior to COVID, I stopped officiating. And so when I was coming back into officiating after COVID, obviously wasn't in shape, wasn't fit, and, could barely walk in a grocery store, much less run down a basketball court, right? And so I tried to kind of get back into officiating, started doing high school basketball again, and I just couldn't get up and down the court the same way. I was just too heavy. I just wasn't, wasn't healthy, really. It wasn't even about being fitness. I just wasn't healthy. And so that was something I said, okay, if you're going to try to give this a go again and try to get back into college basketball, you're going to have to change some things. And so that was one of my main goals, more so than even trying to get back into college officiating when I talked with you, was to be healthy, but to also try to chase that dream again. And so since then, obviously, with the weight loss I had, my officiating has improved as far as my fitness level, getting up and down the floor, and it improved to a level to where I actually just had an opportunity to work a championship game for one of the junior college conferences that I'm in just last week, actually. And I hadn't seen my supervisor that assigns those games since COVID. And he says, yeah, you're looking like the guy that I first hired years ago. And so I'm looking to go to some camps this year. I know we talked about we're going to kind of ramp up here in March. I've had some training things with the new job that has started that haven't allowed me to really, do the 2-a-days that I like to kind of do. I kind of do the, workouts, but do the workouts in the morning and kind of do some cardio in the evening. So we're going to ramp that up and really get myself to where we want to be premium for these camps. But I have all the momentum, the mental is there for it, the spiritual is ready for it. And so we're going to put these final touches, on really getting that athletic look that they're looking for. But the future is bright, I really believe, for my officiating.
I do too. And a lot of times I'll hear people, and this is going a little outside of what we were just talking about, but I want people to kind of have an understanding. A lot of times, well, you're not going to be there in person. There's not. They don't understand how there will be a relationship, and how and I try to explain to them it's actually probably going to be a deeper relationship than you would ever expect. Obviously, you came out and stayed, at one of the places I own out here as well. But when you found out that news about the junior college championships, I'm not sure I was the first person you called. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but who was I? How quickly did you call me to let me know that happened?
You absolutely were the first person. Literally in the car, having the conversation.
It was Saturday morning. I remember answering. Right?
Yeah, it's having the conversation with the supervisor. So before he actually saw me at the championships, he gave me a call letting me know that I'd be working the tournament. And he said, hey, there was a coach that mentioned that you had lost a lot of weight and he hadn't seen me, right? And my supervisor hadn't seen me. And so he said, how much weight have you lost? Because he didn't know, right?
Yeah.
And I said, well, lost maybe 60, 70. Who's counting, right? Kind of, He said, no. And he was being so sincere. And he said, no, I love that for you. He said, it's never really ever been about, your performance on the court. He said, if you ever want to, do this thing at a high level, there's a certain standard, which there's that word again, standard, right, that you have to have. And so I said, I know. And I said, I appreciate your confidence in me. And so as soon as we got off the phone, I said, I couldn't call you. I said, Siri, call Zac, right? And so I called you because this thing is real. The relationship piece that you and I have, I would have never had to have seen you in person. I was thankful to see you in person. But I also say that anything in life from a relationship perspective, it's in relation to, right? That's in the word. So in relation to what do you want to get from Zac if you're working with him, you have to, sow into him because he's certainly going to sow into you. So you've sowed into me. And so you were one of the people that I wanted to share that with because you were one of those catalysts that God brought into my life to get me going to something, once again, that was purposeful for me. And so you've been there along with me the whole way. And, if I, for whatever reason, don't log in 2 or 3 days, you call, hey, is everything okay? If there's a change in schedule, let me know how I can be flexible.
Yeah.
Do you need me to hop on a Zoom with you? You've always made yourself available to me. And if I've ever had to text you or send something in the chat in your app, immediately, you're instantaneously, and you're 2 hours behind me because I'm Central Time, you're, West Coast Pacific. So you're always available. And I've really appreciated that because more so than just a client relationship that I have with you, I do believe it's a true friendship.
I do 100%.
And I've always appreciated it.
Yeah.
So
let's take it to right here, right now then. We've talked about your father throughout and standards. I very much consider myself a man of standards and principles, and I definitely live my life about that now. And it's gratifying to do that because you don't have to think about if I'm going to do something this way or this way, or how am I going to approach that. already know it. I know my standard and I know my principles, and nobody's going to change those for me. Your father did the same things to you, just as my grandparents did for me. Your father could see you now. How would he think you compared to where you were, or where would he, let's not even do a comparison. When your father looked at you now, how would he think that you're living up to his standards?
What's really, I guess the silver lining of when my father passed is he got sick all of a sudden. He was healthy, and then all of a sudden something happened. But I had some time, I flew back and forth to see him. And so we had some time to have those final conversations, right? And so what stood out to me was how well he knew me. Because one of the things I always thought was like, man, my dad doesn't really understand, he grew up, in Mississippi. My grandfather was a sharecropper. So he was a farm boy, went to the military. And, I was more of, went to college and went that path, right? Corporate sales, things of that nature. So I was like, does he really understand? And so one of the final conversations we had, he said, I'm proud of you. He said, I want you to, find a quality, job that's going to help, your legacy, right? Take care of you long term. He said, get back in shape, get back into officiating. I know you love it. And he said, and, always walk with God, right? Keep your focus,
always him.
And so I think even when I think I was at my worst and I was having those moments, because that was one of the things that I was disappointed about, was I wasn't showing up well enough for my father. I wish I could have done more for him in those kind of last days, right? But he built me up in a way that let me know that he was going to love me even if I earned it or not. And so I do think the standards that he set come out of love first and foremost, and not out of some sort of, you have to have a duty, right? And that's where I think even from a military perspective, we talk about we do it for duty, but it's also love of country, right?
100%.
So when you love something, it's not really a duty. You have a responsibility to make sure you follow through what you love. And so if I look at where my dad would see me now, he'd be like, yeah, that's my son. Yeah, that's what I expected.
Yeah.
And so I think, he was already proud of me before, but I think he was loving me through to where he knew I was going to be. Yes. And I'm grateful for that.
Yeah. And you always had to put that adversity in your children's life or make them understand, because if you don't and everything's easy, it's funny how when you make everything easy for people, 100%. Never works out in their favor. Speaking about being easy for people, there's a guy out here that was kind of having a lot of the similar struggles you were, and, where they might be in life. What would you kind of tell them, like, hey, maybe, talk with Zac or talk with someone like him to where to help you get going?
First thing I would say is be honest with yourself, and what I mean by that is be honest. If I say, hey, go have a conversation with Zac, if you're not going to be honest about where you are, and I know that's tough for people sometimes because they feel like they're being vulnerable.
We always hide ourselves. We talked about hiding ourselves from God, which we know is unconditional.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so what I would say, find a man, and if since you specifically said a man, I'm going to speak to a man's journey, and obviously I'm a man in the journey I've had, but find a man you can be vulnerable with. And Zac, you are a person a man can be vulnerable with, And so what I would say is be honest, be vulnerable, and be open to the feedback that Zac's going to give, and be prepared to be challenged, but also be prepared to be supported within that challenge.
Yeah. All right. Let's go into one of my favorite segments. It's called Rapid Fire.
Okay.
So there's no thinking, no explanations. First things that comes to your mind. So, as somebody who lives in Alabama now, I know you're a Texas boy, but you live in Alabama right now. Auburn or Alabama?
Oh, wow. Are you going to do me like that?
I have to, man.
I'm in there.
I'm from Alabama. I got to.
So I'm in sales, like that movie Blue Chip. When I'm in a certain area of Alabama, it's Alabama. It's Auburn. I'm LSU. Since I've been there, Alabama was kind of the standard. They won a bunch of championships while I lived there, so I'll say Alabama.
Good. You can stay. You can stay here now. All right. And then as a college officiating guy, I'm big into college, and so this won't air until this is probably over. Who's going to win the championship
this year? Oh, that's tough. Maybe coming into this interview, I would have said Duke because they've only had a couple of losses this year. But they just got pushed by the 16 seed.
Yeah.
So I guess I got a little bit to hedge a little bit, but Arizona looked really good this year. So I would maybe say between Arizona and Duke.
You got to watch them here in a minute.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Your father walks into the room right now. What's the first thing he checks?
Oh, wow. That's a good one. What's the first thing he checks? Just in any room?
No, with you or a room or what? He walks in the room right now. What's the first thing he checks? Is he checking you, checking the room? What's he doing?
Yeah, I would probably, if I'm in the room, he's probably checking to see what I've got on. I would probably say that.
Hold those standards still?
Yeah,
Okay.
maybe one of those standards, making sure that my uniform is fit. I would say that.
What was harder to admit, that you were in a dark place, or do you needed help getting out?
Needing help getting out.
Yeah, it's hard, man. Faith or discipline? Which one came first in the rebuild?
Faith.
Yeah, every time. What's the biggest lie men tell themselves when it comes to telling themselves that something's off?
Biggest lie that they tell themselves, that procrastination factor. I'll start tomorrow.
Yeah, that's a. Oh, yeah, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll work out tomorrow. I'll get that tomorrow. I'll eat better tomorrow.
Once everything kind of lines up, it's Friday, so I'm gonna go grocery shopping, and then Monday we'll start.
Yeah, we always make those little things where it's like, hey, if I get this order and this order, that's when I'll do that.
Right.
And we do that as people, man. We're good at that. And then you sell medical devices into operating rooms. Does your own doctor know more about your health, or less than you do now?
I would say my own doctor probably knows less because when I went to go see him, he was like, man, what have you been doing?
Yeah.
Like he was just raving about like great this, that, and the third, and because I had some blood work done just to kind of see, where my cholesterol levels and stuff were and everything. He was like they give you the, the in range, not in range, like everything was like perfectly in range. Like everything was phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. What is the first thing that changed when your body started working right again?
Oh, energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Energy, which
sleeping through the night very well.
I don't know if you remember. Do you remember what my number one goal is for every guy?
Higher energy.
Higher energy, because it's a subset of all the nutrition, fitness, sleep. All the subsets always lead to the energy levels.
And when I say higher, like I'm a guy that's drank coffee before.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a guy that's had, not every day, on the energy drinks, but definitely really didn't eat any of that stuff.
That's great.
At all.
Worst call you ever made on the basketball?
Oh, come on. Why are you going to do me like that? Gosh, I'll tell you what coaches and fans think every call, right?
Sure. Yeah. Parents especially.
Yeah, I will say that it's funny because, and I don't know how maybe the general perception is, but sometimes they think like when you blow your whistle, that could potentially be your worst call. Oftentimes I think when you don't blow your whistle, that can be the worst call. And so, because sometimes, a lot of people ball watch when casual fans going to watch the ball. But there's a lot of, so I challenge anybody that's watching March Madness, right, to don't watch the basketball. Like watch what's happening, the action off ball. Mm-hmm. That's really where your game is at. It's very similar like in football, right? You can watch the running back or the quarterback, but if you're looking at the line of scrimmage, there's so much going on. You can see the hole before it opens, right? And so off ball, they're setting screens. And when that alley-oop dunk comes, that guy's not wide open for alley-oop dunk for no reason. There's normally a back screen or something that's happened. So sometimes, like I would say missing a screen that the offensive player is illegal and it opens up for like a wide open shot, like that's probably been one of the, I would say those are tough sometimes.
Gotcha. Okay. So if a guy's listening right now in his own dark chapter, what is the one thing he needs to hear? Make it short. Let's keep it concise. One thing.
Yeah. I would say have a conversation with God first.
Yeah.
And give it to him and let him give you direction, because Zach, I didn't have to do anything. It all came to me once I trusted him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. The last question: the man you're becoming, is he closer to to the man that your father raised to be, or someone that your father has never seen before?
Yeah, I think it's closer to the man that he raised me to be. Yeah. This isn't foreign where I'm at now. What was new about it was the adversity and then coming through. I'd never really experienced something, this deeply adverse in my life. And so being on the other side of that, there's definitely a newness of what I've stepped into. But this is the man that I truly believe when I felt like my dad was being a little bit too militant, a little bit too strict. It doesn't take all of that, right? Okay, lighten up. But this is where he was preparing me for. And so it feels good. What's so great about my job and officiating and the things that I'm doing, there are things that I enjoy to do. And so it's not toilsome.
Yeah. And
so I'm having fun doing what I'm doing. I'm enjoying doing what I'm doing. I find fulfillment and satisfaction in what I'm doing. And I haven't even reached the ultimate goal of what I'm trying to accomplish yet. Yeah. But I'm content right where I am. And I do know that it's just a day at a time. And this is who, when I had the last conversation with my dad, he said, I love you. This is the version of me that he was loving.
That's great. And just want to end with this for me to you. You talk about things that doing what you love to do. And one of the reasons I answer so fast and I'm always there like that is because I genuinely love what I do. Like, I love having impact on other people's lives, and it gives me a sense of purpose that I don't think I could have ever wished for. But what you might not know, what you might not understand is just everything that I help give you guys, you give back to me tenfold. And the person that makes me want to be better every day, and the example I want to be for my own children. I get to see inspiration from you guys and your accomplishments every day. So I wanted to thank you for that, and thank you for having me coming on the show today.
Appreciate you. Thank you so much, Zach.
Randall, again, thank you for being here. Thank you for being that open. And here's what I want you to take from the conversation. Randall Norwood grew up in a military household. His father, Master Sergeant Norwood, set a standard for him to become old enough to understand what it meant. Discipline, integrity, consistency, and accountability. And Randall carried that standard through a career that most people could not even map. Recreation therapy, industrial sales, HR technology, and now a career in medical devices. From the outside, the system was always working, but there was a season where it was not. And that what makes Randall's story different. He's not the same as everybody. He did not go to find a new diet. He did not go to sign up for a challenge. His first step was finding getting right with God. And when the spiritual foundation was back in place, the right people started showing up. He found me on LinkedIn, and we connected. From there, he was able to become a client, and he was able to get pointed in the right direction when it came to meals, meal planning, nutrition, fitness, and one by one, the structure came back. Not because he was chasing it, because he was aligned and he was ready to receive it. And then he executed with the same discipline that his father had instilled into him from day one. The results are real. He dropped the weight. He sleeps better. His endurance on the basketball courts has changed, and his confidence is different in every aspect of his life. He will tell you that the transformation played a direct role in his landing his career in medical devices, and now he's pursuing the goal of being a collegiate level basketball official, which requires the kind of precision, conditioning, and mental toughness that most men talk about but will never actually build. The standard medical system did not get him there. They were playing sick care, 10 markers, normal range, tell them to take pills. This will be what we see on you next year. That is a system built to keep you from dying, not to help you become the man you're supposed to be. Those are completely two different sports. Randall did not just change his habits. He changed his identity. And he will tell you that he started with faith. Your kids, they don't want your money. They just want you to play with you. And you cannot do that running on a standard that was never built for a man who's actually trying to perform. If this episode hit home, subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. Share it with the guy who needs to hear it. The guy who knows something is off, but has not pulled the trigger yet. You know who he is. Send him this episode. You cannot lead others if you're running on empty, but it starts with leading yourself. Empower your body, invest in yourself. I'm Zac Armstrong. See you next week.